Commander Fiskar had served the Vithari Dominion for 214 years. He had crushed rebellions on burning worlds. He had watched stars die. He had stood in rooms where the fate of entire civilizations was decided over cups of bitter alien wine, and he had never once felt the cold touch of real fear. Until today. He stood in the operations center of the Dominion Security Bureau, staring at a holographic display that showed him something his mind could not accept. The behavioral prediction algorithm, a system so advanced it could forecast the actions of trillions of beings across 1,000 star systems, had just returned a result it had never returned before. Pattern null. The system did not have a name for it. It did not have a classification. It simply displayed 2 words in bright red text and offered no further explanation. No predicted behavior. No threat assessment. No recommended response. Just silence from a machine that always had an answer. And at the center of it all was a human woman. Fiskar pulled up her file. Dr. Elena Vasquez, age 34, born in Sao Paulo, Earth. Former field medic, xenobiologist. Currently posted as a diplomatic observer on Relay Station Orin 6, a forgotten refueling outpost on the far edge of Dominion space. So far from anything important that most star charts did not even bother to label it. He knew why she was there. Everyone in the Bureau knew. 2 years ago, on the Dominion core world of Tessara Prime, a Kreth warlord named Galven had taken 40 hostages inside a government building. The Kreth were a violent species. They respected only strength and considered negotiation a form of surrender. The Dominion's standard protocol was to wait for the hostages to be killed, and then destroy the building from orbit. It was clean. It was efficient. It was how things were done. Elena Vasquez had walked into the building alone. She had no weapons. She had no armor. She had no authorization. She simply walked past the security line, through the broken doors, and sat down across from Galven. The Kreth warlord was 8 feet tall, covered in bone-plated skin, and holding a plasma blade that could cut through starship hull plating. Elena was 5'6" and wearing a lab coat. She talked to him for 9 hours. No one knew exactly what she said. The building's internal sensors had been destroyed. But when the doors opened the next morning, Galven walked out first. He set down his weapon. He looked at the Dominion soldiers surrounding the building and said 4 words that no Kreth had ever spoken to an outsider before. The human is right. The hostages walked out behind him. All 40 of them. Alive. The Dominion did not punish Elena. They did not reward her either. They simply moved her as far away as possible and hoped she would be forgotten. Humans were a Category 2 species, fragile, short-lived, emotional, and largely unremarkable. They were not supposed to do things like that. It made people uncomfortable. And now, she was doing something again. Fiskar expanded the alert data. Orin 6's communication array, a basic system designed for simple supply requests and weather reports, was broadcasting a signal. But not a normal signal. It was powerful, focused, and aimed directly into the Hollow Reach. His stomach turned. The Hollow Reach was a region of space that even the Dominion left alone. Old records described it as empty, but that was not quite true. It was more accurate to say that anything that had ever gone into the Hollow Reach had never come back. And the Dominion had eventually decided it was better to stop asking why. Elena's signal was punching straight into the heart of it. He pulled up the technical analysis. The signal was not in any known language. It was not using any recognized communication protocol. The encoding was so complex that the Bureau's best analysts could not even determine if it carried a message or if it was something else entirely. And perhaps most disturbing of all, Elena Vasquez had no training in communications engineering. She was a medic and a biologist. She should not have been able to operate the array at this level. She should not have been able to produce a signal like this. The algorithm could not predict what she would do next. That was what pattern null meant. For the first time in its existence, the system had encountered a mind it could not model. Fiskar closed the file and stood in silence for a long time. Around him, the operations center hummed with the quiet activity of 100 analysts, monitoring 100 different threats across Dominion space. None of them knew what he was looking at. None of them would understand if he told them. A human, a single unremarkable human on a forgotten station at the edge of nowhere. And she had just done something that broke the most advanced predictive system in the galaxy. He made his decision. He opened a secure channel to the nearest rapid response unit and selected 5 operatives. Not ordinary soldiers. These were Vathari elite, gene-enhanced, combat-hardened, each one capable of taking down a small army single-handed. Roth, the squad leader, was a veteran of 60 years of active service who had never failed a mission. Ilkari was a close combat specialist who could move faster than most species could see. Then was a technical expert who could disable any system ever built. Scythe was a psychologist, trained to break down resistant subjects through conversation. And Den was the youngest, quiet and careful, the one who noticed things others missed. 5 of the best the Dominion had to offer, for one human woman. Fiskar wrote the mission brief himself. The orders were simple. Go to Orin 6, restrain the human, shut down the signal, contain whatever she had started. And then he added one more line, a line that had never appeared in a Dominion security brief before. Do not engage in conversation. Humans are dangerously persuasive. He sent the orders and sat back in his chair. The holographic display still showed pattern null in bright red letters. He stared at it and tried to convince himself that he was overreacting. She was one woman. She was unremarkable. But the machine disagreed. And in 214 years, Fiskar had never known the machine to be wrong. Somewhere at the edge of the galaxy, on a station that nobody cared about, Elena Vasquez finished adjusting the communication array. She stepped back, wiped her hands on her trousers, and looked out through the observation window at the vast darkness of the hollow reach. Something looked back. She smiled, turned away from the window, and walked to the kitchen. She had a feeling she was about to have visitors, and it had been a very long time since anyone had visited Orin 6. The least she could do was put the coffee on. She filled the machine with the last of her real Earth coffee, a small bag she had been saving for a special occasion, sent by her sister from a shop in Sao Paulo that had somehow survived the integration. The smell filled the tiny kitchen, warm and dark and impossibly human in a station built by alien hands. She set out 6 cups, 1 for herself, 5 for whoever they sent. Then she sat down and waited. The transport ship docked with Orin 6 at exactly 0400 station time. The docking clamps locked with a heavy metallic groan that echoed through the empty corridors. The station was small, barely large enough for a crew of 10, and it felt even smaller with 5 Vathari soldiers standing in the airlock, checking their weapons for the 3rd time. Roth went through the briefing one more time in his head. 1 human female, no combat training beyond basic field medic protocols, no known weapons on the station. The mission should take less than 10 minutes. Walk in, restrain the target, disable the communication array, extract. Simple. But nothing about this mission felt simple. He had read the file on Elena Vasquez. He had read about Tessara Prime. He had read the warning at the bottom of the briefing, the one about not engaging in conversation. And he had felt something he had not felt in 60 years of service. And curiosity, in his line of work, was a dangerous thing. Weapons ready, he said. Ilkari, you take point. Then, stay on the communication array. Scythe, Den, you're with me. We move fast, and we don't talk to her. Understood? 4 voices confirmed the order. Ilkari opened the inner airlock door and stepped into the station. The corridor was quiet. The lights were dim, set to a warm yellow that was nothing like the harsh blue of Dominion standard lighting. The air smelled strange. Not bad, but unfamiliar. Something warm and rich and slightly bitter. Roth had never smelled anything like it. They moved through the station in formation, coring each room as they went. The living quarters were small but neat. A bed with a folded blanket, a shelf of physical books, actual paper books, the kind that humans still made, for reasons no other species understood. A photograph pinned to the wall showing a group of smiling humans standing in front of a building covered in green plants. No weapons, no barricades, no traps. They reached the kitchen at the center of the station. The door was open, and there she was. Elena Vasquez was standing at a counter, pouring a dark brown liquid from a metal pot into a row of ceramic cups. She was wearing loose gray clothing, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy knot. She was shorter than Roth had expected, softer. She looked like something he could break with one hand. She looked up when they entered. She did not flinch. She did not step back. She looked at 5 armed alien soldiers filling her kitchen doorway, and she smiled like she was greeting friends she had not seen in a long time. "Oh good, visitors," she said. Her voice was calm and warm, like the strange smell in the air. "Do you want coffee first? Or should we skip to the part where you try to arrest me?" Roth opened his mouth to give the restraint order. Nothing came out. He closed it again. Ilkari, standing at the front of the formation, with her hands on her weapon, tilted her head. "What is coffee?" "Don't talk to her," Roth said. But it was too late. Elena's smile widened. "Coffee is the single greatest contribution humanity has made to the universe, and I will die on that hill. It's a drink. You brew it from roasted seeds. It's bitter and warm, and it makes everything slightly more bearable." She picked up a cup and held it out toward Ilkari. "Try it. I made enough for everyone." "We're not here to drink your—" Roth started. "Roth, right?" Elena said. She looked at him with those dark human eyes, and he felt something shift inside his chest. 60 years of service, 3 commendations for valor. You broke your left arm on Kellen 4, and it still aches when the station pressure drops. She turned to the others. Ilkari, close combat specialist, born on the southern continent of Vaith. Then, you built your first communication relay when you were 12. I hear it still works. Scythe, you studied xenopsychology at the Grand Academy. Top of your class. Her eyes moved to the last member of the squad. And Den, the quiet one. You notice things. I like that. The kitchen was silent. 5 soldiers stared at a human woman who knew things about them that were buried in classified files. "How do you know our names?" Den asked quietly. "I know a lot of things now," Elena said. She set the cup down on the counter and leaned against it, crossing her arms. She did not look threatening. She looked tired. "Things I didn't know 6 months ago. Things no human should know. I could explain it all right now. But trust me, it goes down easier with coffee." Ilkari was the first to move. She lowered her weapon, stepped forward, and picked up the cup Elena had offered. She sniffed it, and her pupils widened slightly. Then she drank. The expression on her face was unlike anything Roth had ever seen on a Vaithari soldier. A mixture of surprise, confusion, and something dangerously close to pleasure. "It's good," Ilkari said, sounding almost offended by the fact. Then took a cup next. Then Scythe. Then Den. Roth stood in the doorway, the last one holding his weapon. Elena poured the final cup and set it on the table in front of an empty chair. She sat down across from it and waited. He sat down. He picked up the cup. He drank. It was, against everything he believed about human culture, genuinely good. "Now," Elena said, wrapping her hands around her own cup. "I know you have orders. Restrain me. Shut down the signal. Take me somewhere quiet. where the Dominion doesn't have to think about me. I understand. I really do. Then you know how this ends, Roth said. I do. But here's the thing. She leaned forward. The warmth left her eyes, replaced by something deeper, something steady and unbreakable. The signal can't be stopped. Not because of the array. The array is just a speaker. I'm the voice. And I've been changed, Roth. Something out there in the hollow reach has been listening to us, to humanity, for decades. Our radio signals, our music, our arguments, our prayers. All that messy, loud, beautiful noise we've been throwing into the void since we first figured out how to build a transmitter. Scythe, the psychologist, leaned forward. You're saying something in the hollow reach made contact with you. I'm saying something in the hollow reach chose me, Elena said. Not because I'm special, because I was willing to listen back. Every other species the Dominion has encountered has either ignored the hollow reach or feared it. Humans, she laughed softly. Humans heard the silence and thought, I wonder what's out there. That's what we do. We hear nothing, and we answer anyway. Roth set down his cup. His hand was steady, but something inside him was not. He had spent his whole career following orders without question. The Dominion told him what was dangerous, and he neutralized it. The system was simple, and it worked. But Elena was not dangerous. He could feel it in the same way he could feel a change in gravity or a shift in air pressure, something deep and instinctive that had nothing to do with his training. She was not a threat. She was something else entirely. You understand I have to report this, he said. I'm counting on it, Elena said. She refilled his cup without asking. Your commander, Thiskar, he needs to hear what I have to tell him, not through a report, not through a screen. He needs to come here, sit in this chair, drink this coffee, and listen. Because what's coming isn't something the Dominion can shoot or contain or classify. What's coming? Elena looked toward the observation window. Outside, the hollow reach stretched across the sky like a wound in the stars, vast, dark, and utterly silent. An answer, she said, to a question the galaxy forgot it asked. Roth picked up his communicator. His squad watched him. Elena watched him. He thought about his orders. He thought about the warning not to engage in conversation. He thought about how, despite every protocol he had ever followed, he was sitting at a table with a human, drinking an alien beverage, and seriously considering ignoring a direct order from the Dominion Security Bureau. He opened the channel. Commander Thiskar, this is Roth. The target is cooperative. The signal is not what we expected. I'm requesting your presence on Orin 6. There was a pause. Then Thiskar's voice, cold and careful. Explain. Roth looked at Elena. She raised her cup in a small toast. Commander, he said slowly, she's cooperating. But I think we have a much bigger problem than one human. Thiskar personal transport arrived at Orin 6 12 hours later. He had not slept. He had spent the entire journey reviewing every piece of data the Dominion had on the hollow reach, and what he found was troubling. Not because of what was there, but because of what was missing. The Dominion kept records on everything. Every star system, every asteroid, every drifting piece of debris in their territory was cataloged, measured, and classified. But the files on the hollow reach were almost empty. A few old survey reports from centuries ago, a handful of perb telemetry logs that ended abruptly, and one note, buried so deep in the archives that it took 3 levels of security clearance to find it, written by a Dominion scientist who had been dead for 800 years. The note said only this: something lives there. Do not wake it. Thiskar walked through the airlock and into the station. He was tall, even for a Vathari, nearly 7 feet, with the gray-blue skin and sharp features of his species. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent 2 centuries learning exactly how much force the universe required, and never applying more than necessary. He found them in the kitchen. All 5 of his elite soldiers were sitting around a small table with the human woman. They were drinking from ceramic cups. Ilkari was laughing at something Elena had said. Then was examining the coffee machine with the fascinated expression of an engineer who had found something he could not explain. Scythe was listening intently while Elena described something about a place on Earth called a farmer's market. Den was sitting quietly, watching everything with those careful eyes. And Roth, who had never once in 60 years broken protocol, was leaning back in his chair, relaxed, holding his cup like it was the most natural thing in the world. Fiskar stood in the doorway and felt the cold thing move through him again. Elena looked up. "Commander, I saved you a seat." There was indeed an empty chair at the table, positioned directly across from her. A cup of coffee sat in front of it, still steaming. She had known exactly when he would arrive. He did not sit down. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, "you are in violation of Dominion Communication Protocol 7, Unauthorized Contacts Protocol 12, and approximately 30 other regulations that I will list for you in detail once you are in custody. I am ordering you to—" "The coffee is getting cold," Elena said. "Submit to restraint and allow my team to—" "It's real Earth coffee, Commander, not the synthetic stuff. My sister sent it from Sao Paulo. There are maybe 100 bags of this left on the entire planet. You really want to let it get cold?" Fiskar closed his mouth. He stood there for a long moment, looking at the human woman who was smiling at him from across a kitchen table, as if he were a neighbor who had come by for a visit, and not the most senior military officer in this sector of space. He sat down. He picked up the cup. He drank. It was remarkable. He would never admit this to anyone. "Talk," he said. Elena nodded. She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. The warmth was still there, but underneath it was something heavier. Something that sounded like it came from a place much deeper than a small woman in a kitchen. "The hollow reach is not empty," she began. "There is something there. The oldest records in the galaxy, older than the Dominion, older than the Vathari civilization, older than any species currently alive. Call it the threshold. It's not a creature. It's not a machine. It's more like a presence, an awareness that exists on a scale we don't have words for. It thinks in gravity waves and solar winds. It dreams in the movement of galaxies." Fiskar said nothing. He held his cup and listened. "It has been there for millions of years, maybe longer, and for most of that time it slept. But about 130 years ago, something woke it up. Radio signals, messy, chaotic, unorganized radio signals coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system." "Earth," Fiskar said. "Earth," Elena confirmed. "Specifically, our earliest broadcasts. Music, news, voices arguing, children laughing, people crying. All of it just pouring into space with no direction and no purpose. Every other species in the galaxy that developed communication technology did it carefully, with structure and protocol. Humans just started yelling into the void because we couldn't help ourselves." She paused and looked at her coffee. The threshold had tried to make contact before, hundreds of times, over millions of years, with dozens of species. Every single time, it failed. The Kreth went into a rage and destroyed 3 of their own colonies. The Vanar simply shut down. Their entire neural network collapsed under the weight of it. The Pelori tried to weaponize the connection and burned themselves out. Every species that touched the threshold either went mad, went violent, or went silent. "And humans?" Fiskar asked. Elena smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that humans wore when they knew something that hurt, but had decided to carry it anyway. Humans felt it, sat with it, and made coffee. That's it. That's the whole secret. Our brains are wired differently. We hold contradictions. We feel grief and joy at the same time. We look at something terrifying, and instead of running or fighting, We say, huh, that's interesting. Let me think about this. The threshold reached out to me 6 months ago, and my first thought was not fear, it was curiosity. My second thought was that I should probably sit down, because this was going to be a long conversation. Roth set down his cup. You said the signal can't be stopped, because you are the signal. What does that mean exactly? It means the threshold and I are connected now. It changed my neural pathways, gently, carefully, the way you might tune an instrument. I can feel it right now, like a hum behind my thoughts. It's not controlling me. It's not speaking through me. It's more like standing next to someone in the dark. You can't see them, but you know they're there. Fiskar leaned forward. Why should the Dominion care about an ancient presence in a region of space we have avoided for centuries? Elena set down her cup. The sadness in her smile deepened. Because the threshold has been doing something for millions of years that nobody knows about. Something it can't keep doing alone. She stood up and walked to the observation window. The hollow reach filled the view, that vast stretch of darkness between the stars. There is a wave of entropic decay spreading from the galactic core, she said. It moves slowly, so slowly that no sensor in the Dominion has ever detected it. But it's there. It's been eating at the fundamental structure of space for longer than any civilization has existed. Stars don't just die, they're being unmade. The energy that holds matter together is slowly, invisibly coming apart. She turned back to face them. The threshold has been holding it back, alone, for millions of years. It has been standing between the galaxy at a slow, quiet death, and no one has ever known. No one has ever helped. And now it's failing. The kitchen was silent. 6 aliens and 1 human, sitting in a tiny room on a forgotten station, and the weight of what she had just said pressed down on all of them like gravity. There was no fear in her eyes, no arrogance, no desperation. She was simply a woman at a table, telling the truth, and waiting to see what he would do with it. The silence stretched. The coffee cooled. The hollow reach watched through the window. So, Elena said, do you want a refill, or do you want to keep pretending you're going to arrest me? Fiskar pushed his cup forward. Fiskar sent his report to the Dominion High Council at 0600 the next morning. He wrote it carefully, choosing every word with the precision of a soldier who understood that language could be as dangerous as any weapon. He laid out the facts, the signal, the hollow reach, the threshold, the entropic decay, Elena's claims, and the evidence supporting them. He recommended further investigation. He recommended caution. He recommended, above all else, that the council listen. The council's response arrived in less than an hour. It was not what he hoped for. The message was brief and carried the seal of the Supreme Arbiter, the highest authority in the Dominion. Elena Vasquez was to be classified as a Tier 1 cognitive threat. Orin 6 was to be evacuated and destroyed. A war fleet, 12 heavy cruisers and the command carrier Unyielding Doctrine, was being dispatched to neutralize the station and deploy suppression weapons into the hollow reach. The operation was designated Silence Protocol. There was no mention of investigation, no mention of listening, just force, applied from a great distance, the way the Dominion had always solved its problems. Fiskar read the message twice. Then he walked to the kitchen, where Elena was making breakfast for 7 people, using ingredients she had somehow managed to grow in the station's tiny hydroponics bay. "They're sending a fleet," he said. Elena cracked an egg into a pan. A real egg, from a real chicken. She had brought 2 chickens to Orin 6, a fact that had never appeared in any official report. "I know," she said. "You know. The threshold can feel them powering up their engines. It's very sensitive to large movements of energy." She flipped the egg with practiced ease. "How many ships?" 12 cruisers and a command carrier. 13 ships to deal with one woman and a coffee machine. I'm flattered. Fiskar did not laugh. Dr. Vasquez, you need to understand what suppression weapons will do. They are designed to collapse subspace communication fields across an entire region. If they fire into the hollow reach, they'll hurt the threshold, Elena said quietly. She set the pan down. The warmth left her voice, and what remained was something raw and honest and very tired. They won't kill it. You can't kill something like that. But they'll damage its ability to hold back the decay. And every moment it's weakened, the decay spreads further. It could advance years in a matter of seconds. Then you need to stop the signal. Give the Council what they want. Let them feel like they've won, and we can find another way to... There is no other way, Commander. She turned to face him. The signal isn't a transmission. It's a connection. Stopping it would mean severing the link between me and the threshold. And right now that link is the only reason it knows there's someone out here who cares. It's been alone for millions of years. Millions. Do you understand what that means? Not just the time, but the loneliness. The weight of holding an entire galaxy together and having no one even know you exist. She paused. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something fiercer. I'm not going to abandon it. I don't care how many ships they send. Roth and the other 4 guards had been listening from the corridor. They stepped into the kitchen. Roth looked at Fiskar, then at Elena, and then he did something that would have ended his career if anyone in the Dominion command structure had been watching. We're not restraining her, he said. Fiskar stared at him. That is a direct violation of... I know what it is, Roth said. His voice was steady. I've followed orders for 60 years. I've never questioned one. But I am questioning this one, Commander, because this is wrong. She's not a threat. She's trying to help. The other 4 stood behind him. Ilkari, Ven, Scythe, Den. Not one of them reached for a weapon. Not one of them looked away. Fiskar looked at his soldiers, the best in the Dominion, trained to obey without hesitation, standing in a line behind a human woman they had known for less than 2 days. He thought about what that meant. He thought about what it said about her, and about them, and about the Dominion that had trained them to never feel this way. The fleet will be here in 6 hours, he said. What do you propose we do? Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked at the observation window, at the darkness of the hollow reach, at the stars that surrounded it like witnesses to something ancient and ongoing. Then she turned back. I'm going to talk to them, she said. The fleet has orders to fire on arrival. They won't open a communication channel with a Tier 1 threat. I'm not going to use a communication channel. She sat down at the table and folded her hands. I told you. I'm the signal. The threshold changed me. I can broadcast without the array. And I'm not going to broadcast words. Then what? A feeling. The room went still. The threshold can amplify what I send, Elena continued. Not control minds, not override free will, nothing like that. But it can take what I feel and let others feel it too, just for a moment. Long enough to understand. Understand what? Fiskar asked. What it's like to be human. The hours passed. Elena spent them sitting quietly in the kitchen, her eyes closed, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The 5 guards stood around the station like sentries, but they were not guarding against Elena. They were guarding her. Fiskar paced the corridors, caught between duty and something he did not have a name for. The fleet arrived at 1200. 12 heavy cruisers dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons already charged. The command carrier Unyielding Doctrine hung at the center like a steel cathedral, bristling with enough firepower to crack a planet. The fleet commander, Admiral Dran, a Vathari who had never lost a battle and had never wanted to, opened a channel to Orin 6. Station Orin 6, this is Admiral Dran of the Dominion 3rd Fleet. You have 60 seconds to surrender the human and evacuate. After that, we fire. Elena opened her eyes. She did not speak. She did not stand. She simply breathed in, and then she let go of everything she had been holding inside. It hit the fleet like a wave. Every being on every ship felt it. Not pain, not fear, not a weapon. They felt what it was like to be human. They felt what it was like to be small and fragile, and standing in a universe so vast it should have crushed them. They felt the grief of losing people, and the joy of holding on to the ones who remained. They felt the absurd, stubborn, irrational refusal to give up, even when every rational calculation said it was over. They felt what it was like to sit in a dark room after losing everything, and still, somehow, get up in the morning and make coffee, because the world was terrible and beautiful, and you were alive, and that had to count for something. They felt love, not the clean, efficient attachment that Dominion recognized and categorized and filed under social bonding protocols. They felt the messy, painful, overwhelming humankind, the kind that made no sense, the kind that hurt, the kind that made people cross battlefields and oceans and galaxies for someone they couldn't bear to lose. It lasted 30 seconds. The fleet went silent. Then, one by one, the weapon signatures began to power down. One cruiser, then another, then 5, then all 12. The unyielding doctrine's main batteries went dark. Across the fleet, soldiers and officers and engineers stood at their stations with strange expressions on their faces, feeling something they had never felt before and could not put into words. Admiral Drayan sat in her command chair. Her hands were shaking. She had fought 30 battles and never once trembled. She opened the channel again. "High Council," she said. Her voice was not steady, and she did not care. "We cannot fire, not because we are unable, because it would be wrong." There was a pause on the other end that stretched longer than any pause Fiskar had ever heard from the Council. Then, silence. The channel closed. The fleet held its position. No one fired. No one moved. In the kitchen of Orin 6, Elena Vasquez opened her eyes. A single tear ran down her cheek, the only sign of what it had cost her to share that much of herself with that many people all at once. Roth set a fresh cup of coffee in front of her. "Drink," he said. "You look terrible." She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and honest, and picked up the cup. "Thanks," she said. "I think that went well." 3 months changed everything. Not quickly, and not easily. The Dominion did not transform overnight. Empires built on hierarchy and classification do not abandon their foundations because one woman made a fleet cry. But something had cracked, a thin fracture running through the certainty that had held the Dominion together for thousands of years. And through that crack, light was beginning to come in. The High Council debated for 11 days. They argued, threatened, bargained, and at one point the representative from the Kreth Confederation threw a chair through a wall, which was actually considered a sign of agreement in Kreth culture. In the end, the vote was narrow but decisive. Elena Vasquez was granted the title of Human Liaison to the Threshold, a diplomatic position that had not existed before, and for which there was no protocol, no precedent, and no instruction manual. When they told her, Elena asked if the position came with a better coffee machine. It did not. She took it anyway. The first thing that changed was the classification system. Humanity's Category 2 designation was officially suspended. For 3 weeks, the Bureau of Species Management tried to reclassify humans into an existing category. They failed. Humans did not fit into Category 1, which was reserved for apex predators and warrior races. They did not fit into Category 3, which covered species with advanced technology. They did not fit into Category 4, which described hive minds and collective intelligences. Humans were individual, fragile, technologically modest, emotionally unstable, and somehow more important than any of those things suggested. In the end, the Bureau created a new designation, Category Null, unclassifiable. It was the first time in the Dominion's history that the system admitted it could not measure something. The second thing that changed was the Hollow Reach. Elena established the first stable communication link between the Threshold and the Dominion. It was not a conversation in any traditional sense. The Threshold did not speak in words or images. It communicated in feelings, patterns, vast slow thoughts that moved like tides across an ocean of consciousness. Elena translated as best she could, but she was honest about the limitations. Some things, she said, could not be put into sentences. Some things you simply had to sit with. The Dominion scientists confirmed the entropic decay within weeks. It was there, just as Elena had described, a slow, invisible unraveling of the fundamental forces that held matter together, spreading outward from the galactic core like a stain in water. It had been happening for longer than any civilization had existed. The Threshold had been fighting it alone, holding back the wave through sheer force of will, and it was losing. The numbers were not encouraging. At its current rate of spread, the decay would reach the first inhabited systems in approximately 12,000 years. That sounded like a long time, until the scientists pointed out that the Dominion itself was 9,000 years old. 12,000 years was not the distant future. It was tomorrow. The Threshold needed help, and the only species that could provide it was the one the galaxy had spent 6 years ignoring. A dozen volunteers from Earth, carefully screened, each one chosen not for intelligence or strength, but for something harder to measure. Resilience, flexibility, the ability to hold something enormous inside their minds without shattering. They were not what anyone expected. There was Maria, a 67-year-old retired school teacher from Mexico City who had spent 40 years helping children learn to read. She formed a stable link with the Threshold on her second day and described the experience as like sitting with a very large, very quiet student who just needs someone to be patient with them. There was James, a 23-year-old musician from London who had been playing guitar since he was 6. His link with the Threshold produced something unexpected, a harmonic resonance that actually strengthened the barrier against the decay. When asked how he did it, he shrugged and said he was just playing the blues. There was Aisha, a trauma surgeon from Nairobi who had spent 15 years working in conflict zones. She could hold the weight of the Threshold's pain, the accumulated loneliness of millions of years, without flinching, because she had already learned how to carry grief without letting it crush her. There were others, a poet, a firefighter, a grandmother who baked bread, a teenager who had survived a difficult childhood and came out of it with a quiet strength that no test could measure. None of them were remarkable by the standards the galaxy used to judge species. All of them were extraordinary in ways the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Orin 6 grew. New modules were added to the station, then more modules, then entire new sections, built by Dominion engineers who had never constructed anything for humans before, and kept making the ceilings too high and the doors too wide. Elena insisted on a proper kitchen, then a garden, then a room with windows that looked out into the Hollow Reach, where the human volunteers could sit together in the evenings and watch the darkness and know that they were not facing it alone. The 5 guards never left. Roth, Ilkari, Ven, Scythe, and Den submitted a formal request for permanent reassignment to Orin 6. The request was unusual enough that it was reviewed personally by the Bureau of Military Personnel, who asked Roth to explain his reasons. His answer was entered into the official record and later became one of the most widely shared documents in the Dominion. It was only 1 paragraph long. I have served the Dominion for 60 years. In that time, I have been stationed on 37 worlds, served under 12 commanders, and completed over 400 missions. I have been given orders by beings who saw me as a tool and treated me as a weapon. In all those years, not one of them offered me anything. Not a kind word, not a moment of recognition, not a cup of coffee. Dr. Vasquez offered me coffee before I had even told her my name. She treated me like a person before she knew if I was a threat. I have never experienced that before. I would like to experience it again. The request was approved. The 5 of them became something the Dominion had no category for. Non-human members of a human community. They ate human food. They learned human customs. Ilkari developed a strong preference for a drink called hot chocolate. Ven spent hours in the engineering bay with the human volunteers, building things that no one had asked him to build, simply because building things made him happy, and the humans encouraged that. Scythe, the psychologist, found that her training had not prepared her for humans at all, because humans did not respond to psychological frameworks. They responded to honesty, vulnerability, and bad jokes told at exactly the right moment. Den, the quiet one, became the station's unofficial record keeper, writing down everything he observed with the careful attention of someone who understood that this moment mattered and should not be forgotten. And Roth stood guard, not because anyone asked him to, but because that was who he was. He had spent his whole life protecting things. Now, for the first time, he was protecting something he loved. Elena watched it all from her place at the center. She was tired. The link with the threshold took a toll that she could feel in her bones, a heaviness that grew a little worse each day, a brightness behind her eyes that never quite faded. She slept less, she aged faster. Some mornings she looked in the mirror and saw a woman 10 years older than she should have been, staring back. But she was not alone. That was the thing about humans. They carried each other. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but stubbornly and without conditions. When Elena had a bad day, Maria brought her tea. When the weight of the threshold pressed too hard, James played his guitar in the corridor, outside her quarters, until the music seeped through the walls and gave her something to hold on to. When she woke up in the middle of the night, shaking from dreams too vast for a human mind to contain, there was always someone awake, always someone willing to sit with her in the dark and say nothing, and let the silence be enough. On a Tuesday morning, 3 months and 4 days after she had first offered coffee to 5 armed soldiers, a new delegation arrived at Orin 6, a formal, diplomatic envoy from the Dominion Inner Council. 12 species represented, all of them dressed in ceremonial attire, and carrying data tablets loaded with protocols and briefing documents about the strange, unclassifiable human species they were about to meet. They were nervous. Their briefing documents were thorough. They had read about Elena's abilities, the threshold, the entropic decay, the fleet that refused to fire. They had prepared speeches and questions and formal greetings in 17 languages. They stepped off their transport and into the station's main corridor, where the lights were warm and the air smelled like something rich and dark and unfamiliar. They followed the corridor to the central hub, where a set of doors stood open. Elena was waiting on the other side. She was wearing a faded hoodie from the University of Sao Paulo. Her hair was messy. She had dark circles under her eyes and a small stain on her sleeve that might have been cooking oil. She looked, by any objective standard, completely unremarkable. She was holding a tray of ceramic cups, each one filled with dark brown liquid that steamed gently in the recycled air. She smiled at 12 species who had come to meet the woman who might save the galaxy. She smiled at them the way she smiled at everyone, with warmth and kindness and the quiet confidence of someone who had looked into the vast dark of the universe and decided that the best response was to offer it something warm to drink. "Welcome to Orin 6, she said.